What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and we're going to give you a very early projected record for Texas in 2024. Keep in mind, this is not an official prediction. This is simply a projection based off of the formula that we use, and it's based off of how tough the schedule is and just how good the opponents are expected to be. So let's jump right in. Before we get actually to 2024, let's look back at the projections from 2023. You can see, of course, an 11-1 record in the regular season. Our projection had Texas at 8-4. That's because the formula that we use is very conservative. And Texas was not, they were, if you go back to the preseason, it was kind of a combination of things. There were a lot of teams in the Big 12 that were expected to be a lot better. And Texas wasn't really in that top tier going into the season. There were some that thought they could get there, but coming out of 2022, they weren't quite there yet. So that's why that projection was so low. I predicted them to go 10-2. Athlon also predicted them to go 10-2, and the over/under was at 9.5. So this team overachieved, and I think we all thought that Texas, or knew that Texas had the talent. And they had the capabilities of doing what they did last year. It's just a matter of can they not lose those games that they're supposed to win? That's they so many years they've done that. I actually picked them to beat Alabama, but then lose a couple other games just because that's what Texas has done. But they finally kind of got over that hump and made it all the way to the college football playoff, of course, and had a great season. So keep in mind, these projections are usually pretty conservative. Although, having said that, Texas actually does pretty well in the formula. But let's get into it here. Again, this is a schedule. This is a scale that we'll use. If it's less than 20%, over 80%, those are games where I think Texas is going to be favored by 17, 18 or more. 20-29, 71-80 games where I think they'll be favored by double digits. 30-39, 61-70 games where I think they'll be favored by about a touchdown, 6, 7, 8, 9 points. And then the games in the white, those are your 50-50 games where I think the spread will be less than a touchdown. But it's not really about the spread. That's just kind of a way to look at it. It's really about the formula that we use and the tiers that we use. And Texas, if you're wondering, Texas is a Tier 1 team. The only other Tier 1 team that they'll be playing is Georgia. Oklahoma is a Tier 2 team. And again, I can't remember all. Michigan is actually a Tier 2 team because of everything they lost. So keep that in mind. But let's start with the easier wins. Colorado State, UTSA, ULM, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, and Florida. All of those games, I think Texas will be favored by 17, 18 or more points. Of course, Colorado State, UTSA, ULM, non-conference games. Those are, Colorado State, UTSA, not bad, group of 5 teams, but Texas still should be favored by a lot. Mississippi State, not expected to be great. Vanderbilt is Vanderbilt. And Florida, Florida, this number could maybe change. Maybe that game will wind up in the blue, but looking at Florida right now, I don't expect them to be much better or maybe any better next season. So, again, the formula that we use, Texas being a Tier 1 team, they would get green games for all 6 of these games. Not guaranteed wins, but you can pretty much count all 6 of these games as wins as it stands right now. Next, we go to the blue. We've got Arkansas and Kentucky. So Arkansas, the reason they're in the blue is just because that game is on the road. If it was at home, it would actually be in the green. Arkansas and Florida are in the same tier. And then Kentucky is a step above Florida and Arkansas, so that'll be an interesting game. But I think Texas will be favored by a couple of touchdowns probably, especially playing at home in that game. So, yeah, you've got 8 games here that shouldn't be too much of a problem. 8 games where Texas should be double-digit favorites, and then it comes down to these other 4, and they're going to be tough. These 4 games will be tough. We'll start with Texas A&M here. I think that's a game in the purple. I think Texas will be favored by about a touchdown, but this is really a wild card with Texas A&M. We don't know how good they're going to be. Mike Elko could get them turned around right away. They could be a top 25 team, or they could struggle, and that's the thing about doing these projections. It's so early. We don't even know what the rosters are going to look like yet. And so that's a tough one to predict, but right now, again, coming off of last year, I think Texas probably will be about a touchdown favorite in that game. And then you've got these other 3 games, all that kind of fit into that 50-50 category. Michigan on the road. I think Texas is a Tier 1 team. Michigan's a Tier 2 team, but it is on the road. That knocks that down to a 50-50 game. Oklahoma, neutral field. This one, if this was a true home game, if it was a home game for Texas, this one would actually be in the purple, but because it's a neutral field, it does put that one in that 50-50 range. And then Georgia playing at home. Who will be favored in that game? It's hard to imagine Georgia not being favored in every single game, but the game is at Texas, so that one's a true 50-50 game. That's going to be one of the biggest games of the season, in my opinion. So those 3 games are your swing games, and then you can throw Texas A&M in there as well. If they just split those 4 games, you're going to get a 10-2 record, and that's actually what the projection is, 10-2. So they're enough of a favorite in the other 8 games, and because they're favored against Texas A&M with the formula that we use, it does kind of come out to them splitting those 4 games and going 10-2, which is a really good projection. Keep in mind, this is a different year, different conferences, different schedules. The teams are playing much tougher schedules, playing a lot of, playing more games against top tier teams. Even though Texas did kind of come out pretty good with their schedule, but still, 10-2 is probably, I haven't done every team yet, but this is probably as high as it's going to get. I don't see a team being projected to do, more than 10-2. Georgia is a tier 1 team. They were projected to go 9-3. So this just kind of shows you the schedule and the possibilities. Texas has a really good chance to be right there in the top 5 at the end of the season because their schedule is not as bad as some of the other teams. But that's the projection, 10-2. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Give me your thoughts, your projections on Texas down in the comments below.